This will be a 200 jury charge. Ready, begin. Members of the jury, at the close of arguments of counsel, it is the duty of the judge to instruct you upon the principles of law that should govern you in your deliberation and in consideration of the evidence and in reaching your verdict. You will now be given these instructions. It is your duty as members of the jury to take the law as it is given in the judge's instructions and to apply that law to the facts in the case, which are properly proven by the evidence, and therefrom arrive at your verdict. It is your duty to exclude from consideration everything except the evidence received on this trial and the law as given to you by these instructions, and from these alone, guided by your soundest reason and best judgment, reach your verdict. If during the trial of this case I have given, or in the course of giving these instructions, I may give to any member of the jury an impression of my opinion regarding the guilt or innocence of the defendant, I charge you to disregard such impression entirely and to decide the issues of fact in this case solely as you view the evidence. You, the jury, are the sole judges of the facts, and the court is the judge of the law only. The information in this case charges that Jane Hart, in the city of Garden Grove in Orange County, on the 17th day of November 1992, did aid and abet one James Smith, who did with intent to steal by threatening an imminent use of force against the person of Jack Pierce, with intent then and there to compel said Jack Pierce to take and carry away the property of said Jack Pierce. Did rob and take from the person of Jack Pierce the property of Jack Pierce, while he, the said James Smith, was then and there armed with a dangerous weapon, to wit, a pistol, against the peace of the state of California. To this charge in the information, the defendant has entered a plea of not guilty, which means a denial of every material allegation of the information. An information is nothing more than a written formal accusation against the defendant, charging her with the commission of a criminal act. You are not to consider it as evidence against the defendant in any way. It does not raise any inference of guilt. You will note that the defendant, Jane Hart, is not charged with herself committing the armed robbery, but aiding and abetting James Smith in the commission of an armed robbery. Robbery is committed by one who, with intent to steal, takes property from the person or the presence of the owner by using force against such person with intent to overcome his physical resistance or physical power of resistance to the taking. Owner means a person in possession of the property. Armed robbery is committed by one who commits robbery while armed with a dangerous weapon. A dangerous weapon means any firearm, whether loaded or unloaded, or any evidence designed as a weapon and capable of producing death or great bodily harm, or any other device or which, in the manner it is used or intended to be used, is calculated or likely to produce death or great bodily harm. A person intentionally aids and abets commission of a crime when acting with knowledge or belief that another person is committing or intends to commit a crime. He or she knowingly renders aid to the person who commits the crime, or is ready and willing to render aid if needed, and the person who commits the crime knows of this willingness to aid. Before the defendant, Jane Hart, may be found guilty of aiding and abetting an armed robbery as charged, the state must prove by evidence which satisfies you beyond a reasonable doubt of the following elements of the offense. First, that James Smith committed a robbery, that is, that he took property from the person or presence of the owner with an intention to steal it. This is, with the intent to take and carry away the property of the owner without the owner's consent, knowing he had no right to take, and with intent to deprive the owner permanently of possession of the property, and that James Smith used force against the owner with intent to overcome his physical resistance of physical power of resistance to the taking of the property. Secondly, that during the commission of the robbery, if you find a robbery occurred, the person who committed the robbery was armed with a dangerous weapon. Third, that the defendant, Jane Hart, acting with the knowledge that another person was committing a robbery while armed or intending to do so, intentionally rendered aid to the person committing the armed robbery, or was ready and willing to render aid if needed, and the person committing the armed robbery knew of her willingness to aid him. In order to aid and abet commission of a crime, the defendant must be shown by evidence which satisfies you beyond a reasonable doubt that she directed her conduct toward the realization of the objective of the crime and acted as a help to a person who committed armed robbery. One does not intentionally render aid when he or she does aid in or help in the commission of a crime in the reasonable belief that giving such aid or help is the only means of preventing imminent death or great bodily harm to himself or herself, and he or she is caused to act in such belief. You cannot look into a person's mind to find his or her intent. The intent necessary to the commission of the offense must be found, if found at all, from the acts, words, and statements of the person which bear on his or her intent.